Hi, everybody. This is Eddie Miranda with Pro League News Pages, and we're about 4 weeks out from the Arnold Sports Festival. Reportedly, it's the largest sports event in the world right now, with it being in 5 continents this year. But in Ohio this year, there's going to be about 22,000 athletes, over 80 sports events happening. And we have the perfect person to be able to talk to you about this actual event itself. And today we have the president of the Arnold Sports Festival, Bob Lorimer. How are you doing, Bob? How's everything?
Very good, Eddie. Thank you for having us on this morning. Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you taking the time to join me in this interview, and so we could talk about this amazing event that you guys having in about 4 weeks. Uh,
Sure.
now, going back a little bit, now we want to know a little bit about yourself before even the Arnold Sports, because we want to know a little bit about your history. If you were ever involved with bodybuilding before this, like, can you give us a little bit of history about yourself?
Yeah, well, again, I was kind of born into this for the most part because my father was promoting sports back in the 60s. And so when I was actually born in the late 50s, 58. And so at that time, my father was already running national championships and track and field and weightlifting at that particular time. And that's how this thing kind of got started. But besides being born in it, in 1970, Arnold competed here with my father in a competition, and it was one of his first bodybuilding competitions to do here in the United States. He had won in 1970 actually here, and he's told my father that it was the best show that he'd ever been in. And when he retired, he wanted to come back and partner with my father. And of course, my father, Arnold was speaking really broken English at that time, and father kid, whatever. But in '76 they teamed up and they started running the Olympia, and so it kind of became a family event for us. I started selling programs and T-shirts and during that particular show, and so from then on, we started continually running bodybuilding shows all the way up until 1989. And again, my background, I guess, was part of putting the event together with my father, just kind of following him around, following in his footsteps of trying to just, create and continue to model what he had been done and forge the way forward from there. So in 1980, I opened up some world gyms, and we started going after equipment sponsors in the 80s, and worked out pretty well for us because I went to equipment sponsors, and in lieu of them giving us equipment for, I bought the equipment from them at a discounted rate in order to buy up start gyms. And so we came open, we started running the World Gym Convention, and kind of just all started to take off really in 1989 once we moved over to Arnold's name.
Now you said like in 1976, your father and Arnold met together. Everything was basically done on a handshake. That's how the business started, right?
Absolutely. Like I said, so in 1970, Arnold was just speaking so broken English. But Arnold knew his vision. He knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to be in the promotion of sports and continue to carry the sport of bodybuilding forward. And so, yeah.
Like in that time between 1976 and 1989, when Arnold actually really happened, that was basically a 12, 13 year gap before the handshake and actually Arnold Classic actually happening. Now, what happened in that time frame? In
Well,
those,
actually, they just shook hands in 1970,
okay,
and they said that Arnold wanted. He knew at that particular time. Arnold's a very forward thinker. He's always 5 to 10 years in the future for everything that he does. And so he knew he wanted to promote sports and promote bodybuilding, and so they just shook hands right there and just said, I want to come back and partner with you. And so it's been but they forged a friendship and have a very good relationship, and so when you're good friends with somebody, also you don't necessarily need to involve the legal system or anything else in pushing things forward. But and they're still to today best friends. So.
now, at the very beginning, you talked about Arnold's vision, like you just spoke about it, right? Now, at the very beginning of actually starting the Arnold Classic and the Arnold Sports Festival, how has that vision, what was that vision at the very beginning, and how has that vision progressed into what it is today?
Well, and that's kind of where the interesting part starts, because again, when Arnold had won, he won $500 here. But when he retired in South Africa in 1975, the cash prize in Mr. Olympia was $1,000. And so what he said to my father, he says, I want to come back and really try and legitimize the sport of bodybuilding and raise this cash prize from 10,000 to 100,000, so that so these guys can actually make a living from this, and they're able to push the sport forward. And so the first year they came in, first year they teamed up, they had a $10,000 cash prize, and they immediately raised it to 100,000.
Wow.
And just kind of unheard of at that particular time. But of course, we did it through the sponsorships and try to take the sport of bodybuilding to the next level, and they really did that. So.
And when it started in 1989, you only had two divisions, which were the only two divisions at the time of the league.
One division. We had just men's bodybuilding. So.
Oh, okay. I for some reason in the stats it shows that women's bodybuilding was also incorporated with that as well.
We brought women's bodybuilding back in. I don't. We'd have to check out the exact year that we probably did it, but so we brought women's bodybuilding back in probably in 78 or 78, somewhere in that area. That's a good question. I'll have to go back and look at what the exact was.
But with that said, the incorporation of divisions throughout the years, you had both divisions at Stronghold, and I believe it was 94. You guys started bringing in figure, I'm sorry, fitness.
Fitness. I was going to say we brought in, but in 92, or it had been 2 years before that, the IFBB didn't have fitness, so we brought in Wally Boyko, the World Federation, and we ran a fitness competition with them for the first couple of years, and that was when Carol Simple came in and won, and because she was with that other league, and then when Jim forged the league of fitness, then we switched back over. So with that, you still progressed in 03, you guys brought in figure. In 2011, you guys brought in bikini. So for quite a few years, it was a dominant women's event. But I also saw an interview with your dad that the Arnold Sports also started it being with women's sports. So how does that correlate with each other, that you had such a dominant women event for so many years in correlation to it starting as a women's event or from women's events? Yeah, well, again, in that particular area, we just followed along the line of the IFBB, because as the IFBB started to do divisions, we work hand in hand with the IFBB, and of course, if they add a new division in, and certainly at the grassroots level, they definitely need pro divisions beyond that. So, we work very hand in hand with the IFBB, and again, just like this year, they've added the professional wellness division, and so we'll be looking at that here in the next year or so.
No, most definitely. And in 2011, that's where you guys really started to expand. In 2011, you guys went into Europe. 2013, you guys started in Brazil, and then between 2015, 2016, you guys expanded into about 6 continents itself, right? Right now, you guys are in 5, but with that, what were the challenges, and what was and what challenges did you guys encounter, and what goals did you guys have set out in order to go out into outside of the country?
Yeah, well, again, this was Arnold's really idea again, because he knew in 2010 we met with Rafael Santoja in here in Columbus, Ohio, and Arnold knew that his popularity worldwide was taking off tremendously. But by this time, we already have a really heavy sports festival type programming in place. And so for us to replicate and duplicate what we did here and take this model and just move it was fairly easy. The most difficult part was finding the correct partners, because whenever you move into a new continent, you have to find the right people, and so we spent those couple of years trying to identify who those people are. And I think to this point we've gotten very lucky, because we have 4 partners that are just some of the best in the world, and they know the business, they've been in the business, they're from the business, and so was kind of a pretty easy transition at that particular time.
So, and then going into the whole international and the other countries, Columbus, Ohio is the hub. It has all the divisions that all the IFBB, has at the time. But when you go to Australia or Brazil, you don't have all the divisions. Like, for instance, in Australia, this year is going to be the first time that you have men's physique. Now, what is the criteria to have those kind of divisions overseas?
Well, again, we kind of leave it up to the promoter a little bit themselves. So, each promoter has their own, you know, like some sports are more indigenous to other continents than they are here. Like we have, futsal for the first time just down in Brazil there a couple of years ago, and it was amazing just to be able to see some of the other sports and sporting codes. So we've tried to incorporate some of those codes back into all of our events all over the place, so that those sports get the opportunity to be seen as well. And but so we don't necessarily just pick the divisions. It really depends on the popularity. For instance, when we first went down into Brazil, the IFBB was, they had only heard of the IFBB, had never heard of the NPC in Brazil. And we followed the footsteps of what they had at that particular time. So, bikini was very big down there, but men's bodybuilding was extremely small. People, it was very low participation in Brazil, for instance. So even though we knew that it was the forefront and the main, we stayed at it. Some of these divisions just took on a little slower because they weren't introduced into those divisions down there quite as rapidly. But now, if you fast forward 5 years, pretty much everybody in the world knows all these different divisions, and they know how many classes there are. But it also can be very costly because there's 10 divisions now, and each division has multiple weight classes and everything else. So to even run it at a grassroots level, it can get very expensive for a promoter if you don't have enough people that are participating in each class. So
100%.
But,
Now, given the fact of all the divisions, and you had mentioned that you had worked with IFPB Amateur International and, of course, the IFPB Pro League. In 2017, there was that separation between the two leagues. But in different continents, you still have either the IFBB NPC Worldwide or, the IFBB International. Like, how is, given the fact of the split and that you have different events with different organizations, how is that relationship with you guys with both? Is it cordial and good because you're still able to do it? Or has there been like complications because of the actual separation?
well, there's certainly complications, but there's a learning curve for anything. Again, we work very well with all partners, and like you said, alluded in the beginning, we have 86 different sports and events, and that's just here in Columbus. So we get along with everybody very well, every federation and every partner that we have in all these different places. Obviously, the biggest learning curve is you're working with certain judges on one front, and then the next day, for the most part, you're having to start a whole new different things. So we just did the best and adapted the best we could.
Awesome. And we had you had mentioned a little bit earlier about like the wellness division. It's just starting this year. Of course, it's not in the Arnold this year, but I've seen kind of like the trend whenever like a new division comes into the IFBB that you wait maybe at least like 2 years before introducing it into the actual Arnold Sports itself. Now, what's the logistics or the reasoning why you wouldn't introduce it, let's say the year it starts, maybe the next year, but you wait maybe like a 2-year grace period?
Yeah, well, the reason being is because, again, but we have a wellness division, which will be the first year with the NPC here in Columbus. We had it at the amateur level. And the reason why we wait for that grace period is because, at the professional level, you really haven't identified who the best people are. And so usually it takes a couple of years for that to flesh itself out, because when you start when you start a division at the grassroots level, at the amateur level, the judges are still looking to try and figure out what that look is and, how that end-all physique's going to be. And so that usually takes a couple of years for itself just to work its way out, because the first year, you might not have the highest caliper, or you might set the bar for what the physical look's going to be for the future in that particular thing. But we kind of wait for it to play out on the top end, and then that way we're able to identify who the top 10 or 12 people are a little bit better. So.
Awesome. Now, given I've been following it. I've known about the Arnold Sports for years. My first time I ever went was in 2016. I was there like in person, and I always remembered, for some divisions, it's a true like invitation. Like they'll send in their application and you'll hand select quite a few. But for the past few years, between like bikini and men's physique, a lot of people that did apply ended up gracing the stage. And there ended up being, 35 competitors for each one of those divisions. But now this year, it's more hand selected. There's 17 competitors for bikini. There's 12 competitors for men's physique. Why was it for the first couple of years, so many competitors? And then now, why did it just get shut down into it being a strict invite and hand selected?
Okay, well, that's a good question, and very few people do know the answer to that. But again, when there was just men's bodybuilding, for instance, we just tried to pick the best field we could for the people that applied. So if 20 people applied and we knew we wanted 10, we went back and just took the results of the top 10 that had the best results, and that's how we picked that particular field. So. And again, as bikini merged the first time, we added it at the amateur, but we didn't add it to the professional for 2 years. And then once it started to get its legs back under it, then we started doing invitation again. As these physique classes came about, and back to wellness is a perfect example because it's the one that we added this year. So what we did is we started at the amateur level. Everybody's it's an open competition, so everybody and anybody can enter at that particular level. Now, if somebody comes out and they get a pro card, what we're hoping that they do is that they go and compete in other people's shows. Because what we want to do is we just want to take again, this is the Arnold. So being at the Arnold is one of the most best. We're ultimately trying to get to 10 to 12 people. In some of these classes, bikini and figure and part of the wellness division, there's hundreds of girls. And there's hundreds of people in those divisions. So what we try and do, and we got hundreds of applications. So we still try and whittle it down to just find out who finished the best in those places to pick those categories. So for instance, when we did the physique the past couple of years and they were brand new, Jim asked us, at that particular time said, hey, will you add, physique classes? And I said, yeah, but we don't know who the top 10 pros are. So what we did is we just went back in and we said, if you place top 10, and this is because it was the first year, if you place top 10 in any show, then you're automatically qualified in. And we ended up getting, 140 applicants off of that thing. And so then next year, we whittled it down from the top 10 to the top 5. So we had to place in the top 5. And then that way, last year, I think we ended up coming back down to about 27 people that were registered in. So this year, we took it down to the top 3. So you had to place in the top 3 in the competition to be eligible to compete here. And I feel like right now we're right about where we need to be because that's where we ended up with a smaller field, but we have the best caliber possible out there from this particular field. And I really think that, what it does, and I think that we're going to continue to keep it at this, that we'll do invitations in the men's bodybuilding, but for the rest of the classes, I think that we're going to end up going back down to you had to qualify to get in. And what we like about that, though, is that it also forces some of these competitors to have to go out and do other shows. So, if you went your first show and you took 4th place, you're not qualified. So we really want to get back into the fact that, because there was 130 pro shows last year. And so how do we help the other promoters and the other people in the other sports is, we feel this is the best way to give back to the sport too. So, we want to make sure these competitors are going out and doing all these shows. When Arnold was competing in his last year, he did 13 shows in 1 year. Right today, you only had, particularly in the men's bodybuilding, there's only one or a couple of guys that are doing more than 2 shows. And our hats are off to guys like Dexter and them because, look, Dexter's not afraid to go do shows. He goes, look, my career's short, and why diet like crazy and do one show? It just doesn't make sense to us. I mean, you're down, you're in shape, and, and it boggles Arnold. He goes, I don't know why. The guys are dieted and they're down in good shape. Why not continue to do show after show after show? Because there's plenty of opportunity for them. And why they pick and choose just doesn't make sense. So that's how we look at it.
And then the whole amateur division, for the NPC, for the regular NPC and now NPC Worldwide, you guys started that in 2007. You're going on almost maybe 15 years of having the amateur, pro card qualification at the Arnold. But now you guys in between 2017 and 2018, you guys switched it to NPC Worldwide and start introducing a bunch of international people. Now, how has that response been with the international competitors coming in? And then I also understand that as an amateur, if you do win the overall, you get qualified in order to compete in the Arnold Classic as a pro the following year.
That is correct. So again, there's been a progression that's went along that line as well. But like you said, in 2007 when we first started to do it, look, the sports change. The direction of sports changed completely a lot, and there wasn't as many shows back then either. So in 2007 there's 5 or 6 big national shows, and then there's the Arnold. So I think about 2009 we did team up with Rafael Santoyo on the amateur level to start to bring international competitors in here, because before that we were just focusing mainly on NPC competitors, and we were getting them mainly from Ohio. And so the caliber wasn't quite to the standard that we wanted it to be. So when we brought in Rafael, the caliber of the competitors went through the roof. I mean, the first year Essa won and Rowley won, and so we really pushed through some really great competitors. It also brought, we feel it also brought a lot of emphasis to the world stage too, because all of a sudden, we opened it up from what people were seeing in the United States to an international event. And I can tell you, for the next 10 years, we ran on that international platform. In 10 years, we didn't have a single person from the United States win a category in 10 years. And so that's a little embarrassing from me being in the United States side of things, because you have all these beautiful girls and you got great physiques here, but the caliber was mainly coming out of Europe. And so, where it's going from here, today, it's hard to say, because again, there's good competitors from around the world. So even when that split happened, we still want to have give the best competitors an opportunity to compete anywhere that they want to compete.
No, and it's working, because I've seen a lot of international competitors even before the NPC Worldwide that would just win and conquer over the amateurs themselves. In fact, I do know, like, after NPC Worldwide, there were a couple native from the U.S. to start winning, but it's still prominently international people, like people from Brazil or people from Europe that end up getting like that overall, which is amazing, because it shows the kind of caliber that of athlete that there is outside of the United States.
Yeah, well, there's good caliber in both. It's just a matter of which shows they pick to choose to go to, So at the particular time when we were working with Rafael, I mean, it worked very well, because what they did is they went back to an international basis. So the people had to win their nationals in another country to qualify for Columbus. So we were getting the best of the best. Where it's just open, we're getting just the individual people that want to come across rather than the best of the best still. So I mean, even though Jim's trying to do an international event, you still need those leagues and those federations, behind you, rather than just individual basis. So.
Now, when I started these these news pages, one of my main purposes was to kind of educate people on social media, because I saw in the league itself that it could have been improved on how people were interacting and doing their posts and everything like that. But I believe that the social media has played a huge part in the Arnold Sports itself. Now, in what ways has it helped you with the actual event, and what ways have you guys used it in order to leverage the event itself?
Well, I mean, social media is everywhere. I mean, social media is changing the direction of the world in general. So, I mean, if you take a, presidential candidate or whatever else, I mean, they're showing you what the powers of the internet is and what the powers of social media are. What's interesting for us is that the social media more or less is tending to be back towards people than it is sports, because we have some just some athletes have as many social media followers as whole federations do. So it's absolutely amazing where that's leading to. But it's the retagging, the reposting. What you want to do is you want to get people that have good social media followers and backgrounds to post and tag what you're doing as well. Mm-hmm. So I think look, social media is still fairly new. It's still 10 to 12 years old, and from depending on how you look at Facebook or whatever, but it's evolving and emerging, and it's going to be interesting to see where it happens in the next 10 years. So for your children, it's going to be amazing what they do. So they'll probably, there's a lot more competitions going on online now too. People are like, we have, some rogue record breakers and stuff from our strongman events. And now in order to qualify, you have to do stuff online. You have to post it online and, break a certain record or lift a certain thing. And, if you can do that, then that's how you get entered. Yeah. So I think that it's going to be really interesting to see where social media takes us all in the future. So whether we'll have a 4D virtual reality, thing from everybody posted in their own bedroom, and there's judges sitting there in their bedrooms, and you're judging how that works. Who knows?
Hey, you never know. I mean, I know it's a big thing that you guys have the Columbus Convention Center, but if you could turn that into virtual instead of having, hundreds of thousands, millions of people attending at the same time, that would be actually really cool.
Well, yeah, it would be cool, but you never know where it's going to be, or you fly your automobile here, park in the air.
Now, out of the 32 years of the actual Arnold Classic, Arnold Sports, what would you say is the best thing that happened, or the best event or situation, like whether it be somebody winning out of all 32 years? What would be like your top moment of everything?
Well, here's the thing. So remember, you go back to 1970 when Arnold was in here with my father, and he was speaking broken English. I think that was our defining moment and our best moment we could have, because we teamed up with an icon that's a 600-pound gorilla that became one of the most recognizable people on the planet. So in 1970, there's no way we could have predicted where we would have been in 1975. In 1976, when we did run the Mr. Olympia competition, there's no way we would have known in in the 80s that I was going to become president, appointed to the President of the Council of Physical Fitness for Sports. And, that's what kind of gave the impetus to us to move into the sporting arena. And, so in 1989, we started a sports, carrying on Arnold's name. Rich Gaspari won in 1989, but, 4 years later, we got 30 sports. And you fast forward, we started adding 2-3 sports a year. And, in 2011 when we expanded internationally. In 2010, I would never have seen that.
Yeah.
Now you go, so you're absolutely right. Every 5 years, everything's just, we're so far ahead of everything that we do. And, Arnold has a vision for 5 years from now. We're working towards that vision, but there's no way I can tell you where we'll be in 5 more years either. But I can, it's been an amazing ride, but we've been blessed, and our most fortunate thing is to be with Arnold, because Arnold still is the biggest spokesperson in the sport of bodybuilding today. He's the most recognizable person in the sport of bodybuilding, and his passion is still for it. He still guides it, leads it, loves it, breathes it, and that's been important to the sport overall. To have guys like that lead in it and continue to give back.
So, with that said, I have one more question for this before we kind of wrap up. The last question I want to ask you is, who do you have as a favorite to win the Open Bodybuilding this year?
Wow. I don't, because again, I think that we're again very fortunate. We have an amazing field this year. Our lineup is some of the best that we've had in a long time. And, that thing's wide open. So, you never know about that sleeper, because these guys can come in here and they just bring it in good shape. Any one of them can win. In this lineup here, you always go, oh, if that guy brought his legs in, he's not going to be beat. If he brings his stomach in, if he gets his back in. And so the guy that comes in and ready is the guy that's going to win. And there's no way you or I or anybody in the industry can say that guy's better than the next, because every one of those guys has some weak point or something that they haven't got right to win those shows. Yeah. And if they bring it, they're going to win. So.
Awesome, Bob. Well, thank you. I want to thank you so much for joining me today, for joining this interview and just being transparent with us and knowing more about the background of the Arnold Sports and where it's going, and your intentions for how to bring this community a little bit bigger, a little bit more together, in order to for the purpose of bodybuilding and for fitness.
Yeah, well, we look forward to meeting you in Columbus, and hopefully see all your listeners in here as well. So, thank you very much. I'm happy to be on at any time.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Talk later.
Good.